area, depth to width. Those are kind of the basic lot requirements. The city has a minimum 60 by 100 lot dimension for any new lots created in the city. This certainly meets that. There's also a 4-to-1 maximum depth to width ratio that is probably, I don't think they have it noted what the actual depth to width ratio is, but it certainly meets that. It's 100 feet wide by approximately 331. So it's a little over a 3-to-1 depth to width ratio. So it meets that standard spot. They will be subject to the requirements of zoning ordinance planning if this property is developed.
Recording in progress.
Anybody else? Well, let me ask you this. Do we have to wait in order for, this looks like a screen went off, or do we just continue on with our meeting and that's life?
I think at this point, we can continue with the meeting. The hybrid is a courtesy to the public,
Got it.
so they have every opportunity to call in.
Okay. This is new to all of us, right?
Yeah. And I'm not a solicitor.
Yeah, but you got the building department sitting there.
Duly noted.
Anybody else have a problem with this? I mean, this is pretty much all in favor?
Oh,
There we go. Green light on.
Okay, I'll make it green.
Okay, what's going on for then?
Okay, we have a review of a minor subdivision of land located at the 1990 Lakeside Drive parcel, which is currently vacant land. The former structure was demolished. A request for a modification of regulations for minimum lot width and depth to width requirements has also been submitted for approval. And this property is located in a R1 low-density residential district. We have Mr. Kidder here with us today to answer questions and talk to the board about what's going on with this property.
Hello, my name is Jeff Kidder. I'm with Kidder Architects. I'm here on behalf of the current property owner who purchased the former Sunset Inn and wants to subdivide it into 7 residential lots for 7 new single-family homes. Our modification is to have we can't meet the 60-foot minimum width because of the overall length of the property divided by 7 is 59.58 feet width instead of 60, so we're almost there within a few inches. The depth to width ratio, the depth is established by the existing property lines north and south, and actually some of the lots go, well, all of them go over the bluff and some of them into the water, so really the true developable area is closer to the limit, so we feel the little bit under and a little bit over are the best we can do with the property we have to work with to get the maximum usage out of it and be in compliance.
This is the old Sunset.
I apologize. In the printed packet, I don't have a copy of the modification request letter. That was sent out via email previously.
I'm assuming that lighter line is the cliff edge?
There is a dash line that says top of bank.
Okay.
There's a dash line that's below.
Oh, there it is.
Below, there's top of bank, and then in the city of Erie, you're allowed a minimum or minimum 25-foot setback from the bluff, and that's the second line below the darker dash line. We're gonna, yeah.
You could easily meet the width requirement with 6 lots. obviously.
It would exceed 60 foot
Yeah.
if there were 6.
So what's the owner's rationale as to why, other than cramming another lot in there, we should approve it?
Being that it's lakefront property, want to maximize the opportunity for number of homes, and we're 5 inches under the 60-foot limit, so we would like to do 7.
Certainly. What are you got any idea what the typical lot sizes are in that neighborhood?
I don't know.
Yeah,
Small family,
yeah,
little family houses.
okay.
Well, can we just talk about aesthetics there on the, I'm with you, I think that the aesthetics there matter,
Mm-hmm.
you know, on that bluff in that area. I think that that's important to keep in mind. I think 6 homes versus 7 homes crammed onto that bluff, you know, on a waterfront area make a difference. It's still very, that's a neighborhood stretch there still.
Small little stuff.
I agree with
Yeah.
the aesthetics, like the point of moving out that way is to have the property and have the, not necessarily space, but the personal space, if you will, and cramming that other way there.
I'm sure people will buy them. That's,
Yeah.
I don't really care
I
on who's gonna do it, so.
mean, cramming, we did look at cramming. We did explore 7, 8, 9, and it was too crowded and too close.
Yeah.
And we were right at 5 inches under the 60-foot minimum, so we thought that was a reasonable balance of compliance and maximizing the development within the rules of the subdivision ordinance.
My wife.
Same thing.
Are these gonna be lots for sale
Right, individual lot purchased with a home on them.
with a home on it?
Yes, in a single-family home, freestanding single-family home on each lot. But it'll be maintained as a whole. There'll be association, so all the landscaping, all the plowing, all the general maintenance of the property will be under a singular control.
So it's gonna be more of a community.
Yes, yeah, and yes. So it's gonna be,
So uniformity is basically.
right.
Okay.
Yes, they're gonna be sold with homes on them. The homes are gonna be built and, you know, purchased at a time, and they're gonna be controlled. So it won't look like the entrance to Presque Isle, where every
Yeah.
townhouse looks completely different. There's gonna be
Right.
uniformity across all 7 lots, and singular maintenance and control of the general appearance and upkeep will be a requirement of anybody buying that home. Will basically be an association. Because we can't
Almost
do
like condo.
condominiums in R1, but it's gonna be managed like a condominium.
Anybody else? Again.
I'll make a motion to approve.
Make a motion to approve? Second, all in favor?
Aye.
All right.
Thank you.
Yep.
Thank you, Jeff.
Wondered what they were gonna do with that, once that guy bought it. Okay. American Rescue Plan.
Me.
Me.
That's what this file's for. As many of you are probably aware, the city of Erie is receiving as an entitlement community under the American Rescue Plan Act passed this year by the Biden administration. The city is going to receive a direct allocation of $76 million. And I wanted to come before the Planning Commission today and just talk a little bit about how the city is looking at that funding and how it will be deployed. and then some next steps. So at this point, if you've sort of been following local news, the county has recently come out of their, has come out with their plans for ARP funding, because the county too is getting a direct allocation of just over $52 million. The county has very specific line items already identified that they're proposing for their ARP funding, but the city is not at that stage yet. Because the county is a community of over 250,000 collectively, they have a higher reporting requirement and need to have more specificity in their report that is due at the end of August. Same with the city, but that's another reason why the city, you're not seeing a line item proposal yet from the city. So we have this framework that just kind of explains how the city is looking at this funding and what we intend on to do moving forward. It should be surprise to no one on this group that we have done an exceptional amount of planning work since 2016. And Aaron Carey's here. We took Erie Refocused in 2018 and made sure that it was our guiding document moving forward. We've had lower level neighborhood strategic plans that we've been working on to effect Erie Refocused. That's really why we do these things. We're not ignoring what Erie Refocused suggested as our guide. We are actually just drilling down and working with residents to affect the implementation of it. So without qualification, the city's priorities are all but set because of the planning work we've done. So we will take the ARP, that was one of our directives, is we will use the ARP to rapid fire implementation of all of the plans that we have completed. As we all know, plans are not static documents. This is meant to be an iterative process, so we're not just shutting the door on any new ideas and other ways that the plan should be implemented and how ARP funding can be used to do that. So in order to have a more sort of robust and open dialogue of how ARP funding will be specifically deployed, the mayor, through all of the number of advisory councils that he has created in the past 3.5 years, and there's 3.5 years, there's a list there of about 13 or 14 that we work with on a regular basis, covering sort of all different communities and backgrounds and different interest groups. The mayor will be convening a council of advisors, so representatives from each one of those groups will work directly with this administration on our plan to invest in the ARP funding. Planning Commission is listed as one of those stakeholders, and so we will be asking for, at some point, probably in September, a representative from Planning Commission to sit on. Whoever wants to be at the table to make decisions on $76 million, feel free to volunteer or arm wrestle for it. We will be asking for reps. There's not a lot of time that will be required of the representatives who will sit on this larger council of advisors. We anticipate probably a meeting every other month over the next year or 18 months as we deploy the funding. Just so you know the logistics of that ARP funding, $38 million comes to the city now. We actually have that sitting in our account now. And the other half comes a year from now. And that's true across every local municipality who's receiving the funding. Same for the county, same for the city. Wow is kind of, you think about the funding. So 52 million, do the math, 52 million at the county, 76 million at the city, just under 6 million for Mill Creek. All the other non-entitlement units of local government in Erie County get an additional $12.7 million. The school district is getting just over 60 million in their ARP allocation, and that doesn't include all the school districts. So there's a lot of funding that's coming down to Erie County, all municipalities across the United States. The United States is flush with cash right now in many, many circles. This was a $2 trillion act Half of that trillion is coming to local governments and other programs. The other half is going directly into households and rental assistance. So there's a lot of federal funding coming down the pipeline. It's already in the system. So back to the City of Erie. We will work with the Council of Advisors and to ensure that this funding is being distributed in a transparent and equitable fashion. And that's really the goal of the Council of Advisors, to help with that transition. What we're doing now is we're hosting and holding conversations like this with everyone. That's basically been 50% of my time, is talking to groups like you about the ARP funding. There are restrictions. This is not a blank check. It is also not HUD funding. So this is being distributed by the Treasury, which means it can be very, very flexible. So those who are familiar with the HUD allocations that the city gets, this is not that. So, but what it is that there are guidelines by which we can invest the funding. On page 4 of the framework, limitations and guidelines, you see that there's 6 different areas of investment. These 6 are the same across the United States, no matter how large your community is. So you'll see things in this list that don't actually apply to the City of Erie, but would apply more to a city like Philadelphia. And if you're keeping track, Philadelphia is getting $1 billion of ARP funding. Pittsburgh's getting about $500,000. City of Erie is coming in third at $76 million. So we beat Allentown out on at least something in the Commonwealth. So 6 different areas. Number 1, public health expenditures, that's more of the county's role, so that's probably where, and I know that's where some of their funding will be going. It's not something that we're looking keenly at because we don't think it's necessary. Number 2, 4, 5 and 6 are the areas that we think that the City of Erie should be investing and focusing more on. Of course, those who've been economically impacted by the pandemic, the premium pay for essential workers our direct essential workers are paid very well, and there was no loss of jobs during the pandemic or layoffs, so we don't see that that's a necessary element for us to focus on. There are revenue losses that we can claim, not only from 2020 when the pandemic hit, but all the way through 2024 when the funding has to be obligated from ARP. So there's a very small window to invest $76 million and do it wisely. We have until December 2024 to obligate all of the funding, and it has to be spent by 2026. So in the time frame of how quickly government works, you know that that's actually not a very long time frame to get that kind of money out the door and do it. I qualify, do it wisely. So we want to be sure we're doing all of those things. But we are able to claim revenue losses, which will help a lot of our communities in Erie County, I'm sure. Invest water, sewer, and broadband infrastructure. This isn't as much a COVID relief act as it is a rescue plan for local governments. So that's why you see water and sewer and broadband. It's to help with recovery efforts of COVID, but it's also, here's some funding for our desperately needed infrastructure that we know is needed in our communities. And that's why you see water, sewer, and broadband. We do have, and we've been working with our public works to identify sewer and stormwater improvements, capital improvements. This is where we could actually do capital improvements. Broadband, we're still a little unsure of. The school district has a lot of funding to help help children get access to remote learning and things like that. So we don't really see that as a high priority for the city, but we're open to what that could look like for us in the future. We are also hyper cognizant that the federal government is looking at a major infrastructure bill, which could supplant the need for us to use any of our local funds or require a local match. So we're also hyper cognizant of that. If we can match this funding, that is our goal. We've internally set a goal of taking our $76 million and tripling it. And that would be a measure of success for us. I've actually put that number at 250 to 300 million, which more than triples it, but that's my own personal goal. If we can get us to that, I'd be happy. And then, but one thing that you will see in infrastructure is we also see this as an opportunity to improve our digital transformation of public works. Right now, we still rely heavily on paper, hard copy, plans, maps, things like that. We have recently been working with Esri, which is the leader in GIS, which is Geographic Information Systems, and we will be looking to onboard and completely convert the work that we do here into a GIS system. So that will probably be the heaviest lift. That will take the full 3 years to implement, but that is something that is a high priority for this administration and change the way that public works. And our other departments, you'll see changes coming through the planning and zoning department when we onboard and go totally as much as digital as we can. It helps with future analytics, capital improvement plans that we've kind of talked about. It helps with all of that. And then to serve the hardest hit communities and families. The Treasury guidance is very permissive in investments done within qualified census tracts. Fortunately or unfortunately, the city has a number of qualified census tracts. Pretty much everything north of 26th Street except Frontier is in a qualified census tract, which gives us broad latitude to invest this money in a lot of different ways. We can invest it in parks and public spaces. We can invest it in small businesses and workforce development. It goes on and on and on. But in qualified census tracts, because we are one of very few that actually have that in Erie County, we have broad flexibility. So that's a good thing, but unfortunately we have qualified census tracts, which means that they're low performing, under-resourced communities. And then the final page is the vehicles by which we see deployment of the funds. In 5 different ways. This, again, is just really trying to focus the administration, elected officials, and our council of advisors on it's just not wide open. We actually have to start focusing where are the buckets where we start putting this money. The first one is direct relief grants and loans. That's essentially just the name we've given to our existing programs that are run out of our Department of Economic and Community Development. We have loans and grants, programs that are already going out to small businesses and people and homeowners, and we're just going to add additional funding to those programs and get them back out the door. And so that is an easy win for us. Transfers to special units of local government, like the city's Redevelopment Authority, are permissible. So we have been working on really rebranding the city's Redevelopment Authority as the primary housing program resource provider for the entire city, and giving them the funding they need to actually have a multitude of the housing programs that we know we need for homeowners, to improve our rental stock, because our rental properties are in deplorable shape. Grants, historic preservation grants. So these are all the ideas that the Redevelopment Authority has been working on. They have about 8 different programmatics areas that they have been building in anticipation of this funding coming to them to do that. Maintenance of infrastructure, we've already talked about that. Water, sewer, digital transformation, sewer, stormwater, and digital transformation. The last 2, I think the ones that will be of most interest to this body is the participatory budgeting and public-private partnerships. We're going to call those P3. Participatory budgeting, that would essentially entail earmarking dollars, significant dollars, and working with our neighborhood groups and our residents to improve many of our parks and our public spaces. So they would help set those priorities. That's the participatory part of it. It's not city coming in saying, here, we're here to help. This is what we're going to be doing in a park that you need, that's so vital to your family and your friends, or yourself. But we're working with you to actually identify what those improvements are and then making sure that we have the funding in place to do them. And that is where you will see the qualified census tracts will be our focus area. One, because we have the latitude to do that, and two, it's because those are the hardest hit communities in the city of Erie. So a lot more to come on that. That's where it's exciting and scary because it's a lot of work, but the Planning Commission is an integral part of that process. And then public-private partnerships. So this essentially just says we know that we have a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity to move the needle finally in the city of Erie. And the city has the once-in-a-lifetime opportunity to be a player in that and an investor in what that looks like. So there will be funding put aside that we will work with our community stakeholders. And what we would anticipate seeing are projects that these are to elevate ideas that have been working successfully but need to rapidly scale up. They have evidence of private and civic investment already, and they are so competitive that they would compete for additional state and federal funding. Those are sort of the decision lens broadly that we would anticipate projects that would fit in that bucket, and then we would invest. Some people have asked me, how do you make sure that someone's not double dipping, going to the county saying, I want a transformational, because they have a transformational grant that's coming out of ARP. I said, well, it's easy. I make a phone call and I ask them, who's investing? We actually work with the entity that is proposing the transformational idea, the project. We should all know it well. And we work from there. So it's a highly collaborative process by which we will fund major initiatives. I don't have those numbers for you because this is going to take a while to work with City Council and get them on board. You've already seen the stories of the next greatest idea is coming from others. They're not coming from this administration, they're coming from people who have an interest in wanting to do things in their community. So we will all have to vet all of that with City Council. Sorry, that's a lot, but there's still more to come. But if you have any questions, I will try to answer them. And the the guidance from Treasury was interim up until the 16th of July. I don't have the final rules, but I do have a 42-page FAQ that helps refine what we can do with the money. So I've already read it, so if you want me to forward it to you, let me know.
I trust you.
I'll forward that to you.
I'll read it.
I'll trust you.
It's on the Treasury guidance, but I'll
I
send
trust
you the
all of
link.
you.
It's a fascinating, process, so.
Could be.
If I could just cherry pick an example as a question, like you, on the list of potential target projects, you have the downtown streetscape master plan, which is a project I'd like to see happen, but which one of the priorities does that fit into? Serve the hardest hit is like the only one it fits, limitations and guidelines.
It does,
So
and
you
the city of Erie is the hardest hit
So
community.
some of these are just a stretch on the infrastructure into those broader.
Right, it would not qualify under infrastructure, because infrastructure is very specific to, if you have a sewer line underneath a road, you can pave that road after you replace the sewer line.
Some of it's sidewalks, and you can make stormwater arguments for that.
You can do it, yes. So there's a number of ways. Under stormwater, you could. But we have, again, broad latitude because the downtown is in the qualified census
Yeah.
tracts, and walkability and accessibility through multiple, and that's actually on page something of the FAQ. Someone asked that question. So downtown streetscape would qualify under a couple of different buckets. How would that work? We could directly allocate funding for the downtown streetscape, or we could do it through participatory budgeting. So those are things that I've been jotting down as things that we need to consider. The East Bay Front plan is another one. We could do that through participatory budgeting. Sorry, Tony, you're not familiar with that plan, but we can get you up to speed. But something that transformational would probably need to be earmarked specifically to affect the East Bay front.
But
plan.
then, using that same example, are we chipping away at it, or are we doing all or nothing? Like you know what I'm saying? Like the Streetscape master plan started on 2 blocks, and it basically that was a decade ago. So if we pick one of these efforts, are we gonna do the whole thing, or are we gonna do half of it and then it sits there for another decade?
I mean, you bring up a good point, and that's probably the situation in a number of these different projects. The downtown streetscape is one, East Bayfront is another one, our West Bayfront plan is probably another one, where we have to say, okay, where do we need to focus this funding? And if it's gonna take 3 times the amount that we have, then we go after the 2, 3 other times the grants that we need to do. My personally, and as the planning director for the city of Erie, what I would prefer to see happen in our downtown is not necessarily more investment in infrastructure as much as a vehicle by which the maintenance of that infrastructure is in place to make it sustainable and long term.
Yes.
So
it should be durable. Yeah.
that's, if I was going to ask for private and foundational investment into something that's transformational, invest in how we maintain this infrastructure for the next 20 years instead of invest in the infrastructure. Because if we had maintenance funding, I mean, the $5 million RACB we have, I think it's total of $5 million that we may have right now. Is someone on the?
Armin can be.
Hey, Armin, turn your mic off.
Oh, sorry. The $5 million that John Tushak has been grappling with trying to deploy for the downtown streetscape from RACB, the biggest challenge is the match. We never have the match. We have to cobble together in-kind pennies. He had to get a full assessment of Perry Square. We basically had to give up Perry Square, the value of it, to get the RACB. How is that sustainable? So actually, let's fix the real problem, which is long-term maintenance.
I guess where I'm going.
Sorry, Jason, that
I'd
was.
rather end up with 2 or 3 completed projects than a dozen that are half-baked.
I agree. There has to be, or it has to be fully fleshed out. It's a solid phase that can stand on its own.
So at some point, do some of these fall off the list, unfortunately, because they can't be seen to their completion?
Probably. I mean, Active Erie is one that I think a little goes a long way, and we purposefully designed that transportation plan to not require significant amounts of funding to implement. We've got 5 aspirational projects in there. 3 of those aspirational projects already have some level stream of funding to make them happen, and everything else is within the city's abilities to affect. It's bike lanes, striping, signage. So some of those plans don't seem as large. I mean, it's not a downtown streetscape plan that requires $56 million the day it's adopted to implement. Active Erie's not that plan.
Just the magnitude of these seems to be wide and varied.
Staggering. Yes, I agree, and I think that's something that we need to contemplate as we think through these requests and how we prioritize and things like that. I agree, that's a good point.
All right.
I
Any other
got
questions?
one more on the, so the Redevelopment Authority, since you're retooling that, will it no longer have a focus on commercial redevelopment at all, or it made it seem like it might be strictly residential in its focus?
Is that Armand again?
It's Armin.
Okay.
Let me get a cell phone, text him.
It sounds like he's thinking gunfire.
Armin, turn your mic off. Or should I be looking that way? Armin, turn your mic off.
She might not be able to hear you.
It has modest
Maybe I can.
programs they have some facade funding. This county redevelopment authority is taking on a larger role with industrial redevelopment, industrial blight, and then the city's programs have more funding for small businesses and facades. So we didn't see the redevelopment authority needed to duplicate those services. Yeah. Housing is the white space that really needs a lot more resources to it.
Amen.
Hopefully the days of wholesale demolition are done.
There's no money for that.
Good.
I,
But I
yeah.
mean, that was their stock and trade for years.
Yeah, we're trying to pivot from that one. Pivot, we'll still use that term, 2021, won't we? Pivot?
Yeah, yeah.
Let's pivot.
Okay, well, thank you.
You're welcome.
Got a lot to do in the next.
You'll be hearing from me more on that, and we'll need a rep. Once we actually have a time set. I know, Jason's all about that.
Jason's all about that.
Tony?
I have 2 children the city is auditioning to keep here, so.
Okay. What do we got? Streets.
You're up again.
I know, we talked about this last
Can you
time.
take a drink, something?
I brought my coffee. I knew it was gonna be a coffee kind of planning commission, even at 1 o'clock. Yeah, we talked, last time we were on a call with the MPO is completing their long-range transportation plan. And, Rich and I were kind of going back and forth about complete streets policy being part of, really needs to be elevated. Not that we were arguing, he was forcing me to say, well, tell us what we need to do, Kathy, instead of just griping about it. So what I did is I put it on your agenda to talk about it. And I just want, the reason that I think this is important to keep in front of you and move to the next level is the city, for Tony's sake and Jason's sake, who's hasn't been introduced, but maybe you introduced him, but Jason, oh, I'm sorry, okay. The city completed a bike ped plan called Active Erie and adopted that, I don't know, a couple months ago. And the Planning Commission's role is not only helping to create those plans, but also helping to implement those plans. And, we are not a public works department, but we are the Planning Commission who's dedicated to taking those plans into implementation. The highest priority and the first step in implementation of that plan, although Leanne's Parmenter, who is our traffic engineer, is doing a fantastic job on the projects that are already moving forward out of that plan. But policy is also part of it. It's not just about funding bikeways and trails and pedestrian bridges. It's about how do we actually establish policy to make sure that that plan is implemented and that bike and pedestrian amenities are always top of mind when we are looking at new developments, redevelopments, and things like that. Complete streets policy is the policy that would help do that. And essentially, and I gave you I just gave you a little overview of what complete streets policy is, and then the draft that had been floated by our consultants who helped us with the Active Erie plan. That draft it's a very long policy. That was a lot more than I would have even suggested that we take on, but we haven't moved forward with it. So I wanted to give you a little bit of everything that's in that policy. The Complete Streets policy not only says, and if you haven't had a chance to read it, it basically says what we as a community believe the importance of multimodal complete streets are, and if they are important, and if they are, how we will make decisions now and in the future about ensuring that that network continues to grow. It also allows a level of transparency for the public to say, we have a lot of those friends who come to our planning commissions who care about sidewalks that are open and safe and connected. But this gives something for people to tangibly have to say, here's how we make those decisions and why. A good example of how a policy like this could have helped, and I think that the project is going smoothly, but is the West 8th Street project. There's a large multimodal grant that the city received, 2018, 2017 maybe. It's been a while since they actually got that grant. A couple $1 million, not exactly sure. And it's basically Green Garden to Pittsburgh It's meant to add sidewalks, pedestrian lighting, street trees, help define those driveways that are open seas of concrete and actually define them so it's safer for pedestrians. There was a lot of people who said, well, we need bike lanes too. But fortunately, our Active Erie plan had suggested that bike lanes are not appropriate on West 8th because of the high level of traffic and the speed in which that traffic flows, and that a better alternative route is West 6th. So having that discussion in something other than just a one-time plan in a policy helps to stave off those critics. And some of those critics had been on our steering committee for Active Erie plans. So it's like, wait, this goes against everything that we talked about. That's a complete streets policy in and of itself. And the Planning Commission can certainly look at this. This is a great opportunity for the Planning Commission to be involved as our citizen planners for the city and say, here's what our concerns would be as residents of the city. Here's what we believe is a reasonable approach. This will eventually would have to be approved by the administration, and Public Works would be at the forefront of making sure that these decisions would be made, but I think this is an excellent body to get feedback from, and we don't need to have the feedback yet. You just got it, and I've done a lot of talking, but I wanted to explain the background, how this relates to implementing our plans, and how policies need to advance from all of our planning work, and the Planning Commission is the body that helps do that. It is also a change in historically how the Planning Commission has been asked to work within the city. So you're fortunate that you don't have to sort of change the way that you've done business as a planning commissioner, because you're coming in right at the beginning of how we're going to do things a little differently. So that's complete streets policy. I would also add, after getting ready for this meeting, what I believe this commission really needs to work on is our subdivision and land development ordinance. The complete streets policy is most effective when we have land development proposals, and the Planning Commission has an opportunity to be part of those review processes. It's something that I feel strongly about, and I would, even though it wasn't on our work plan, that's one of the other things I was looking for. Is like, what did we say we were going to do in 2021 on our work plan? Our work plan says let's tackle the zoning ordinance, and I challenge that. And I think the saldos, this Joyce Savacchio adopted saldo is the one that we should probably chip the dirt off and dust off and take another look at. So. Any thoughts? I mean, again, I think this is we come back at the next meeting and have a more in-depth discussion on complete streets policy. But I just wanted again to give you the update, and then I Jake and I take a little time and kind of dig through that saldo and see how we might tackle that. It's going to take the better part of this year, but I think it would be well worth our time.
Sounds good.
And everyone needs a copy of the saldo if they don't have it. So.
Do this public comment thing. We got anybody on that wants to?
How do we know?
Do we have any public comment?
I thought you said earlier they would just come in over the PA, but how do we give you permission to talk?
He does.
Well, I think Frank would be looking to see if anybody is on Zoom that would have to.
Yes, there is one person for public comment. It is Colin Russ.
We do have one.
Mr. Russ, if you
Frank,
would like to.
do we have someone who wants to speak?
I think it's Colin Russ.
Oh, Colin.
Oh, Colin is on. Oh, Colin's our alternate.
Mm-hmm.
So how do we allow that to happen, Frank?
I have brought him into the room.
I can hear you.
And he says no comment on my end. I suppose.
Yeah. It's always the audio. It's always the audio.
Oh, yeah. Well, what's really nice is every time I look at you, I get to see Armin right into his, into his,
He's-
Can't hear anybody in the panel.
well, that's probably good.
You're life size.
Hear Kathy and Jeff, I can barely hear him.
Oh, it must be the
I
microphones.
apologize for, I should have been down there. I was
Is your green light on?
accurate at
My green's
Must have to.
So do we have somebody that wanted to speak?
It was Colin, but he doesn't
Oh.
want to speak.
Okay. Well, I think we're good then. All right? If we don't have anything else, then I need a motion to adjourn.
Second.
And a second. All in favor?
Aye.
All right. See you, Armin.